All right, today we're jumping into a really fascinating, kind of rebellious form of poetry that exploded onto the scene during China's Yuan Dynasty. Now, if you're picturing quiet, serious scholars writing delicate verses, well, think again. This is something completely different.
Just listen to this. I'm champion rake of all the world, the cosmic chieftain of rogues. I mean, wow, that's our starting point from a poet named Guan Hun King. And a rake, by the way, is basically a charming troublemaker. So right off the bat, this line just completely shatters any stereotype you might have about classical poetry. It's bold, it's got swagger, and it's our first real taste of the song poem's wild voice.
So here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at what a song poem actually is. Then we'll get into why this became a golden age for this new art form. We'll explore what made it sound so unique, what sorts of things the poets were writing about, and finally, what kind of legacy it left behind.
All right, let's dive into our first section. So, what exactly is a song poem? Let's get a clear definition.
Okay, so the key thing to know is that a song poem was, well, a song. It was a verse form from Yuan China originally set to music, and it was known for using really down-to-earth, everyday language. This means it wasn't cooked up in some quiet, dusty library. No, this was born in the bustling entertainment districts, in the lively streets. It was popular art, you know? It was meant to be heard, to be sung, to be felt.
And its roots really are with the common people. It grew out of folk songs from northern China and absolutely blossomed during the Yuan Dynasty, which was under Mongol rule. The language they used? It was the vernacular, the way people actually talked up north. It was also super close to the arias, the big songs you'd hear in popular plays. And get this, to be considered authentic, a song poem needed, and I'm quoting here, a modicum of vulgar speech, a little bit of grit to make it feel real.
Which brings us to a really interesting question. How did this raw, new art form end up flourishing in this particular period? Well, the answer is kind of ironic, and it has everything to do with the times.
So, to set the scene, the golden age of the song poem fits almost perfectly inside the Yuan Dynasty. We're talking from about 1279 to 1368. And this was a really dynamic period. You had the Mongol-led Yuan Dynasty in charge, and that meant a lot of cultural mixing was happening.
And here's that irony I mentioned. It turns out the Mongol rulers, they weren't all that interested in promoting the old-school traditional Chinese literature. But this neglect, as it's been called, turned out to be a blessing in disguise. It basically created this open space where popular arts, like the song poem, could just grow and evolve on their own terms, free from all the old rigid rules.
And there's a huge human element to this too. For a lot of highly educated scholars at the time, getting a government job, the traditional career path, was suddenly off the table. So what do you do when you're a brilliant writer, trained in the classics, and your main career path is blocked? Well, you divert that talent, and that's exactly what they did. They started pouring their creative energy into popular arts, writing these amazing song poems and plays for everyone.
Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty. How did these things actually work? What was the secret sauce that made them sound so completely new and different?
It all came down to this amazing technique called padding words. Think of it like this. Poets would take the basic skeleton of a poetic line and then just stuff it with extra words and syllables. It was a total game changer because it shattered the strict, rigid meter of classical poetry. All of a sudden, the natural rhythm and flow of how people actually talked was being turned into art. Here's a perfect example of this in action, again from Guan Hun King. So the basic line, the core required by the music, was just "I am a bronze bean." Simple enough, right? But with padding words, he transforms it into this. I am a jingling, tingling bronze bean that remains hard after being steamed, raw after being stewed, that bounces under a big hammer and will not pop when being baked. See what he did there? He took a simple idea and turned it into this boastful, swaggering, rhythmic mouthful that sounds exactly like someone showing off in a tavern. It's brilliant.
Okay, so now that we know how they were built, what did these poets actually talk about? With this new flexible form, what kinds of stories and feelings did they capture?
Well, the range was just incredible. You really had two sides to the song poem. On the one hand, you had the more scholarly or literati style. These were poems with deep meditations on the past, beautiful reflections on nature or the quiet life of a recluse. But on the other hand, you had the popular style, where its street-level origins really shone through. We're talking love songs of all kinds, bold and witty expressions, and even mockery, parodies, and jokes. Let's start with a literati masterpiece,
This is Autumn Thoughts by Ma Ziyan, and it might just be the most famous song poem of all time. What's so amazing about it is how it creates this incredibly powerful mood, not by telling a story, but just by painting a series of vivid, unforgettable images.
It starts with this picture of desolate nature. Withered vines, old trees, crows at dusk.
Then the scene shifts, and you get this little pocket of warmth and civilization. A small bridge, flowing water, people's homes.
But then, the final line brings it all into focus. It's a traveler's perspective, an ancient road, the west wind, a lean horse. And suddenly you realize that cozy little settlement isn't for him. He's just passing by, and seeing it makes his own homesickness feel even deeper. It's just devastatingly effective.
And these poets could also be incredibly profound. Take this piece by Zhang Yanghao, where he's meditating on history at a famous mountain pass. He sums up centuries of change with this absolutely timeless gut punch. Dynasties rise, the common folk suffer. Dynasties fall, the common folk suffer. I mean, it's such a powerful, clear-eyed look at history from the perspective of the people who actually lived through it.
But it wasn't all doom and gloom and profound suffering. Let's completely switch gears now and look at the other side of the coin, the popular tradition, with all its love, its humor, and its wit.
And we're back to our friend Guanhan Qing for this gem. It's from a love song, written from a woman's perspective, and the psychological insight here is just fantastic. She says, though there was annoyance in what I said, half of it meant to reject, the other half consent. It's so witty and candid, right? It's just a perfectly human snapshot of the complex feelings that come with romance.
Okay, so let's tie all of this together. What is the lasting echo of the song poem? What's its ultimate legacy?
When you boil it all down, the real power of the song poem is its honesty. It was a mirror held up to its time, reflecting a complex and often contradictory age. Because it came from the streets, because it was written in the language people actually spoke, it managed to capture the raw, unfiltered spirit of the era. You get everything. The deep thoughts of the scholar, the clever words of a lover, the swagger of a rogue, and the profound suffering of the common folk. It preserved the real voices and the real feelings of Yuan China, and that's a pretty incredible achievement.